I'm Matt Landau, and this is Unlocked, Season 12, Unlimited Edition. This season, I'm making the case for more creativity in your business. Because the industry has gotten so saturated, markets have become so noisy that ultimately it's creativity, thinking outside the box, writing your own new stories. This is not only what allows market leaders to set themselves apart today, but it's ultimately the skill for navigating these uncertain futures, which everybody is increasingly needing to do. A little bit of background about today's interview with Steve Hafner, who's the co-founder and CEO of Kayak, now for 2 decades plus and running. Steve knows a thing or two about innovation. Now, I knew Steve lived in South Beach because I happened to swim with one of Steve's colleagues, Ralph, who started at Kayak way back in the day. And Ralph was kind enough to introduce me to Steve, and Steve was kind enough to accept doing an interview with me here in South Beach. And I've been wanting to up my podcasting game, so I had Googled recording studio in Miami. And as luck would have it, 3 blocks away from my house is a recording studio called Alacran Studios, which hosts these A-list artists. And I figured I'd just take a stab at something crazy, and I emailed Alacran asking if they'd be open to me recording some podcast interviews during their off hours. And when they responded excitedly, saying, "Thank you so much, this is wonderful, we don't have anything going on during those hours, it will be a great use of our time and our resources," I was one part thrilled, one part terrified, because now I'm walking in to interview in person, face to face, people that I really admire. And when I met Steve, I knew it was going to be a different kind of interview. But what I'd like you to really listen for here is the focus on storytelling. I start off by asking Steve if he considers himself a visionary. And you may be a little bit surprised by his answer. It may make you feel like you're not alone. Steve's journey from fundraising to innovating with basically the world's first hotel to be integrated with an online travel agency, the Kayak Miami Beach, which eventually failed. All these different examples and Steve's learnings throughout them carry this really interesting through line. Telling a better story and knowing more clearly who you are and what your company offers the world, this is a skill worth practicing. This is creativity. And just before the interview, I walked into the bathroom to collect myself and splashed a little bit of water on my face. I was really nervous, to be honest, but I was also really excited. I looked myself in the mirror and I said, "Here goes nothing," which really hit me in a different kind of way at that moment. I knew I had not planned for this interview in the same way that I have ever planned for an interview in the past. I knew that the unlimited is tapped only with an element of mystery, an element of non-planning. And I was ready to bet on that. So here goes nothing. It's not just the title of this episode. It's kind of like a mindset that you may not think you are ready for this, but that stepping into a great unknown is actually where the greatest innovations happen. First, a quick word from our sponsors, another wonderful example of creative innovation, OwnerRez, which is a property management software whose story I've followed really since its inception, back when I was managing my own properties in Panama. And it started for smaller operators. In fact, the founding team and most of the employees who were there at that time still use OwnerRez to this day to manage their own properties, which is a great testament. But as the industry has evolved, so too has OwnerRez, to the point that they're now accommodating larger, savvy vacation rental operators who are speaking about the product in equally passionate and loyal ways as the smaller operators, which to me speaks volumes about an organization. And I got another level of insight into the quality of those relationships at the Owner-Res Company retreat at the end of last year in the Dominican Republic. I learned from the sales team that other sales representatives from property management softwares in the industry have told them that when they learn that a prospective is using Owner-Res, they basically decide to lay off because they know that those operators on average are content and fulfilled and that the relationship with the software is profound. And I think that's a really interesting way of promoting a company. In this case, I'm endorsing them because other competitors won't even decide to go there with their users simply because they know the quality of the success that those relationships have. If you'd like to do a demo with Owner-Res, mention that you heard it on the podcast. The code VRMB30 will snag you 30% off for the first 3 months. Let's get into the interview with Steve. I'd like to start by asking you for your definition of a visionary.
So a visionary to me, and I don't consider myself a visionary, although I've started a few companies. A visionary is someone who takes the time to think differently and to imagine a future that's different than what people see today, right? So it's a little bit over the horizon. But I also think a visionary is someone who actually is pragmatic and gets something done. You know, anyone can dream about living on Mars or being an interplanetary species like Elon Musk talks about. But a true visionary actually makes progress towards achieving it, which he's doing, right, with Starship and other stuff. Because there's a lot of wishful thinkers out there who imagine something, but if you're not actually taking tangible steps to make it happen, I don't think you're a visionary.
And so you started by saying you don't consider yourself one, which is very contradictory to me based on that description you just gave. Why don't you consider yourself one?
Well, I don't think that the companies I've started have been particularly visionary or awe-inspiring. Yeah, I mean, the first company was a company called Orbitz, which some of your listeners may be familiar with. I suspect most of them aren't, which was just the idea of let's book airline tickets and hotel rooms online instead of going to airline ticket offices or travel agents. I don't know that that's particularly visionary, but it was a pretty good idea and it worked. And then the second company was Kayak, which took that and with the subtle changes said, hey, instead of just looking online and booking online, let's look for everything and let you book anywhere else you want to. And that became Kayak. And then later on was Open Table, which is making restaurant reservations online. And then SeatGeek, which is I'm on the board of, I didn't found it. That was about live events and sporting tickets online. So a pretty common theme, which was, I don't know, it's visionary. It's just there's a new thing out there called the internet. This was 20 years ago, by the way, so it's not so new anymore. But let's enable that. Let's use that platform to enable purchasing behavior that before that happened offline. So I don't think that makes me a visionary. I think a lot of people saw the same thing. I just was lucky enough to surround myself with great teams, great investors, and we actually made it happen.
So what I'm hearing is maybe there's like a sliding scale of visionary. So someone who creates something entirely new, like the idea that we're going to live on Mars, that's pretty extreme. Yeah. But what you described is putting together something that never existed before, which is just based on your definition, just as visionary.
I guess you could say that. I don't feel like a visionary, when I read a book about Elon Musk, no one's ever going to write a book about me, thank goodness. But when I read a book about Elon Musk and others, Richard Branson, et cetera, very celebrated people who have started multiple successful businesses, totally far afield. I mean, there's a common theme for the 3 or 4 that I've been involved with, which is migrating behavior online. It's totally different to start an electric car company, to do spaceships, to do Neuralink, to do all that other kind of cool stuff.
Have you ever thought about trying to become more visionary?
I don't think so. No, I mean, the answer is no, I haven't, because I've got my hands full with the endeavors I've got right now, and I try to balance my time on the work side, also with, taking care of 5 daughters and all that stuff. So work-life balance is really important to me.
Some of the research that I've been doing into what it means to be visionary, what it feels like to have a vision, and then to communicate it to other people, which I'd like to talk to you about based on the conception of Kayak. Um, you need to be at a place personally where you're, I don't know if you want to use the word aligned or passionate or really feeling something new to have the idea and then communicate it in an energetic way that people actually feel, right?
Yeah.
Can you share with me kind of what was the situation pre-kayak invention, pre-kayak conception in your life? Like what was going on? Just were some of the signals leading up to that moment?
Yeah, look, we had just sold Orbits, we had taken it public. So I had, gotten a little bit of wealth, right? Which took a lot of pressure off because I already had a family at that point in time, so I needed to pay bills, right? And I thought we could do Orbits a little bit better with a slightly different tweak on the business model, and no one else is doing it. So, I quit my job there 2 weeks after the IPO, and took 2 weeks, wrote the business plan for Kayak, and started the company. And what I was thinking at the time was, well, if it fails, if it doesn't work, I can go back to consulting, or I can go get a job in corporate America. But I'm approaching the age, and the debt load where if I didn't start another company then, I probably would be unlikely to start it later. So I just took the leap, and the initial business plan had a bunch of assumptions, which the VCs who looked at it said, "This is crazy. We don't buy any of it," and it turned out to actually be right.
Hmm.
So with Orbits, we raised $200 million. Didn't get to break even until we had spent 195 million of it. With Kayak, we raised $200 million, but we broke even after 7 million
Hmm.
of loss. So it was just a good idea. And personally, I was at the stage of my career journey where I think a good leader has self and situational awareness.
Mm-hmm.
So it's you read a lot in the media about these visionaries, who are kind of almost at the threshold of being assholes.
Right.
They're so self-confident,
Yeah.
so aggressive that they'll burn their people out to reach their goal because
I
they're
know
so confident about
plenty
their
of them.
goal. I think the vast majority of successful entrepreneurs aren't like that at all, actually.
Hmm.
I think they realize they have a pretty good idea, but they have a good grasp of what they're good at and what they're not good at. They seek to build a team that complements their strengths and weaknesses. And then they have the situational awareness that, when they're trying to communicate a vision, or path to someone, they know what's going to work in terms of
Right.
motivating them,
Right.
right? So
Like
they
a social
they,
IQ.
yeah, they change their style as they go along because you can't build a successful company with just one person. You have to build a team, and you have to take feedback from that team to course correct your vision as the data comes back.
Hmm. Is that always the case that you can't build a company with just one person? That you need a team?
I can't think of any significant company that's just one person. There's a lot of entrepreneurs out there who are one person companies. Vending machine. Someone who has 50 vending machines is a one person company often, or an ice cream truck or a food truck. But if you really want to scale, a company to be, right now, I work for one that has 26,000 employees, right? And we're in almost every country. That takes a lot more than being a one person band.
I've interviewed in this research a lot of artists
Yeah.
and musicians who are effectively one man or one woman shows,
Yeah.
and in some cases very profitably.
Yep.
Especially with today's environment of creators online. You don't need much to put yourself out there and generate a huge windfall.
Yeah.
But what all of those artists seem to be asking me, as the little bridge here that's interviewing people who have made a living off of this, they don't quite know how to build it into something that can make them money and that lasts.
That's right.
What advice do you have for those people who recognize they want to be original, but also are real about wanting to establish themselves
Yeah,
financially?
durability. I mean, that's what everyone that's part of scalability is durability, right? Taking a scrape on someone else's work, right? So if you look at like Puff Daddy in the music business, right? What he realizes, yeah, he was a darn good performer, but he wasn't always going to be a performer. So he said, "What else am I good at?" He said, "Well, I'm good at scouting talent. I'm good at developing talent. I know all the venues and where people should play. I know how to release albums." And he, turned into a producer and then actually started his own record label and built out from there. And it's not called Puff Daddy Records, right? It's Bad Boy.
Right.
So, I think that's true of a lot of people. You just got to rethink your skill set to broaden it beyond just your name and your individual performance.
You come from a background of PowerPoint presentations,
That's an old school software program, but yeah.
which is really, I'm guessing, about building a story
Yeah,
that you can communicate in a way that actually people understand.
that's right.
And when you came up with the vision for Kayak, a huge part of that is going and sharing the story with people.
Yep.
So what are some of the things you started noticing about, and maybe this applies to other areas of fundraising too, that you noticed that you could improve on or that was working well?
Sure. Look, I think all of us are storytellers, right? That's what we do in our day-to-day lives. Business is no different. And with when you're trying to start a company, the story's got to be tight, and it's got to be, it's just like reading a bedtime story to a kid. If they start getting bored,
Right.
you need to change the narrative, right?
Right.
So you just need to read the room and read the body language of the VC. And some VCs don't care about the business idea; they care about the exit. So how much is it going to cost to build this, and how do I get my money back? Right? Others are really interested in what's the idea, what are the hurdles for that, how big can it be? Others are like, oh, well, tell me about the team you're building, right? Because I think it's a great idea. I think I can make money off it, but are you the team that's going to get it done, right? So you just need to change your storyline to adjust for that. And it, for me, it's all about self-confidence, projecting that what you're talking about, and that you pick up on the cues so that you can twist it, and some people actually want to see self-doubt. So with something like that, you say, like, I don't have all the answers, but I know that I'm going to assemble a team that as data comes back and as we see what consumer interest is and partner interest is, we can course correct.
Right. That's powerful.
Yeah. And look, I went to public school in Texas, and then I went to an Ivy League college, and I was woefully unprepared for it, right? And I got really bad grades. But I wasn't that worried about it, because when I got to my job interviews that senior year, the interviewer would ask me, "God, Steve, explain to me your 2.8 average." And in Ivy League, everyone gets out A's. I didn't. And I said, "Well, it's really easy. I didn't come here to school to get graded grades. If I wanted to do that, I wouldn't have had so many extracurriculars. I would not have taken really hard classes outside my area of expertise. I wouldn't have spent so much time with other students broadening my horizons. I did all that instead, and I got 2.8 to show for it, but I'm proud of it."
That's amazing.
And people are like, "Oh, okay, next."
I'm sold.
Yeah, next. But
People are listening to this. That's a great idea. So that was a story that you told.
yeah.
And was that just something that came naturally, shaping a narrative into a story that you could persuade people with?
So look, I think everything can be trained, but we all have our comfort zones. Telling stories for me comes kind of naturally, because I'm a voracious reader. So I love reading stories, right? Less fiction actually than biographical and historical. That's just my jam. But yeah, I like storytelling. But it's just like public speaking. Most people aren't natural public speakers, but you can be trained to do it.
Right. And I like to recommend, like, a lot of people are just terrified at the first thought of ever even sharing the idea.
Yeah.
Ever even saying it. Like, they got this great idea, but they're curled up on their couch, like never sharing it with the world. And until you step over that first hurdle and say, okay, I'm going to go tell my neighbor about this, or I'm going to go tell my friend about this, it starts to get a little easier. Not to say that it's ever easy getting up in front of people and trying to persuade them, but it is like almost like a joke that you're telling, that you learn like what part hits, right?
Yeah. And look, the world is full of dumb ideas, And the only way to narrow down what's the difference between a dumb idea and a good one is to socialize it.
Is to socialize it.
Yeah.
Huh. That's really interesting. I've never heard that before.
Really? Huh.
To socialize it.
Yeah, because when you come up with an idea, you're like, well, maybe dumb, but I don't really know until you bounce it off somebody else.
Yeah, give it air.
Give it air, and then
See if it
someone will say,
grows.
oh, you actually might be onto something. Or they may more likely, yeah, that's been tried before, especially if you're talking to VCs.
Right.
That's been tried before, and it failed
Won't
for this
work.
reason, this reason, this reason, this reason. And then you say, okay, well, I'm going to go back and noodle on that, and maybe the first 3 reasons why it failed aren't true anymore. Maybe computing power is a lot cheaper than it was when the idea first came out. Or maybe there's a new programming language. These are tech examples. Maybe there's a new programming language that's a lot more efficient. So I don't need, AI researchers to do this. I can actually just use AI and someone who's $40,000 a year to do.
Right. Do you think about intuition ever?
I do. I do a lot.
How?
So intuition is kind of at least for me, your inner voice pushing you in one direction, right? And it's a swim lane that you're comfortable with. Intuition, I think it's kind of like having someone on your shoulder whispering in your ear, right? And most of the time, your intuition is pretty darn good, but sometimes it's not, which is why it's really important to have diverse opinions and people on your, in your circle of advisors, because they eliminate your blind spots and they course correct your own intuition. Because what's intuitive to me and what's intuitive to my wife, Stacy, are totally different, by the way. And that we're better together than we are alone.
How early on would you say you noticed that you were paying attention to noticed your intuition?
I think that comes from pretty early in childhood.
Yeah.
I mean, don't you feel the same way, Matt?
Well, embarrassingly, I just learned last year, really put my finger on, that was my intuition, and I'm going to listen to it. Like, I was able to actually recognize it. Yeah. And I shared this with a friend who said that she was going through quite a difficult divorce at the time. And she went to the balcony of her home, and she felt this weird energy in her home. And she said almost like it was haunted, just this weird energy. And she had this feeling like, we must leave. Me and my daughter must leave. And she chose to leave. And she said from that day forth, the relationship ended. Her whole new chapter, her whole new world began. And she said that was the first time she truly felt like she had recognized and acted on her intuition.
Oh, that's interesting.
So I think I've used it. I have this feeling that this is someone I'd like to get to know, or this is a good idea that I think is cool. But I've never really been paying attention. And you mentioned earlier self-awareness.
Yeah.
I don't think I necessarily had hyper-tuned self-awareness even five years ago.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, it's just sometimes you just get to that level of clarity in your thinking, and a lot of time I think it's intuition that helps you there. Where you just say, aha, this is the correct path of action.
Right.
And I guess in your friend's example, it's get the heck out of there.
Yeah.
My example, most of the time, my intuition is business related. It's like, okay, this is how we need to approach this partner. This is how we need to redirect this team and solve this problem.
Ultimate clarity is the confidence that you walk into that room and tell the story with.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's part of it, but...
Or you just make it up.
No, you don't make... I mean, look, there's a time and place to wing it, but most of the time you're much better off being prepared.
Right. No faking it.
No faking it, being authentic, prepared, anticipating the questions and having good answers to them. But sometimes you just got to wing it too.
You ever taken a trip somewhere and having it changed you from a business concept standpoint, just like an aha moment?
Oh, for sure. Look, you have these moments where sitting back here, you make a decision about something. Like, I'll give you an example. At Kayak, when we first started, the rage was offshoring coding to India. So you're sitting in Massachusetts, which is where we were at the time. We said, okay, let's put a development center in Bengaluru, India, of 20 coders. It's great because we can submit a request in our nighttime at the end of business day, and by the next morning, the code will be written. How awesome is that? And it's a fifth of the price, et cetera. So we sprang it up, started a legal entity, hired there, and then it wasn't working. After a month, it wasn't working. It was like, we're getting really crap code back. They don't understand what we're talking about. So I said, let's jump on an airplane. So I jumped on an airplane, flew there, saw the office, and my concept of what was happening there and what was actually happening was totally different. It was a disaster, right? A total disaster. It wasn't a group of 20 folks sitting in front of laptops in a great office getting stuff done with perfect clarity and management like you'd expect in America, right? It was totally different. It was like,
What was it like?
oh my God.
Describe it. Come on, I'm really curious.
Oh, like shabby offices, old computers, people who didn't talk to each other. Everyone's more concerned about getting coffee and getting their errands run by. We had like a team of staffers who just ran errands for everybody, and no quality control. They didn't care. They just wanted their paycheck, and they had other stuff. They were just like sticking it to the American company.
And what's going through your mind when you're seeing all this?
I was like, we got to shut this down. Oh my God, we got to shut it down. So, and the one thing I learned about India, which is an amazing country, by the way, and it's totally different operating climate now than it was 20 years ago, was it was easy to start a company there. It was almost impossible to shut it down. Oh, the starting a company there, I think, cost us maybe $200. Getting out cost us $20,000, which at that point in time was a lot of money for us.
They're going somewhere and feeling something and learning something. There's no
substitute for it.
Substitute for that.
Yeah.
What I find really interesting about your story is that you've been basically in the same position now for how many years? Almost 2 decades?
Yeah, 20 years.
I think the longest standing tech travel CEO.
Yes. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Dubious.
Why?
I think it's because I haven't achieved what we wanted to do with Kayak. It's still doesn't search everything. It's not as intuitive as it could be. There's always stuff to get done to make it better. And I'm still having fun.
You don't get bored?
Not at all. I mean, now with AI and ChatGPT, it just opens up everything that we can do in a totally different fashion. I mean, right now, if you use Kayak, it's pretty much been the same for the last 20 years. You come to our website or to our MWeb or to our app, you submit a query in a structured format of data fields, and we give you a list of search results. But with AI, it totally opens it up. You can now use your Kayak app to snap a photo of an itinerary you draw on a napkin or an itinerary you found from someone else, and we'll automatically start a search and find better prices for you.
That's brand new, right?
Yeah. It works. I can show you. Well, there's not going to be a break, but I can show you right after this. And the next step is just to enable voice and text, and send us a request via WhatsApp or Instagram, a picture, a napkin you write on, or just a voice clip, and we'll automatically send you search results back. And we'll say, do you want to set up a price for it? Do you want to set up a trip? Do you want to look at other destinations? It's awesome.
So I'm guessing you have people who are coming up with these great ideas. It's not all yours.
No, definitely not all mine. We have another 1,000 people at Kayak who do nothing but think of great stuff.
And you're filtering them in a way.
We have
a sounding board.
Yeah.
So that keeps you fresh.
Yeah.
That keeps things exciting. What's the biggest thing that you've learned along these 20 years of how to stay fresh and excited? Because the moment, I'm guessing, as a leader, you start getting stressed or you start doing too much stuff that is not in your sweet spot, it begins to affect everyone else.
Yeah, look, you've got to set the right tone, right? So, I think most innovation comes from this alchemy of dissatisfaction with existing processes and way things are getting done, and then curiosity of, hey, I saw something new coming out. How can I use that to improve what we're doing, right? So AI is a perfect thing. As an example, mobile phones were another perfect thing. The Kayak app, when we first got it, was actually built for BlackBerry, for anyone who remembers BlackBerry.
Yeah.
And at the time, my co-founder, Paul English, who was an amazing, magical guy, was like, Steve, we gotta take advantage of this new computing platform called the BlackBerry and have people like text us and do a search.
Were you using one at the time?
Yeah,
Okay.
we all were.
Yeah.
We're like, oh, wow. Push email? Boom,
Yeah.
push email, amazing, right? And you just get new platforms and new ideas, and you take that to your existing process and you make it better. So dissatisfaction, curiosity, that's where innovation comes from. And if you empower your team to let your newest worker to your most seasoned worker come up with great ideas, and then you filter it through the entire team, magic happens.
Wouldn't you say that a lot of the structures, whether it's education or just corporate America, stifle curiosity in a lot of ways?
For sure. You know what stifles curiosity is bureaucracy, established processes, and culture that doesn't allow new ways of thinking to arise. And the biggest antidote to that we found at Kayak is staying lean. Trying to keep our legal team as small as possible, trying to keep our compliance team as small as possible, letting any of the overinvestment happen in product and marketing and commercial teams. That's where the ideas come from. Not to say that legal and compliance people can't come up with good ideas, but most of the time they're about avoiding mistakes, not about jittering and testing new things.
What about for your kids? Have you noticed that how do you foster their curiosity?
You take away screens. It would be the biggest thing. So it depresses me when I go to restaurants and I see parents sitting at a table talking to each other, and then their kids are all checked out on screens.
I run the beach each morning, and I see people at sunrise not taking photos even, just with their heads down on the screens. Oh, man.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Makes me sad.
I tell my kids, chin up. If your chin's down, you're looking at something. But chin up, you're looking around yourselves. And then coloring books go a long way.
And is curiosity
games.
something that you encourage within the work setting?
For sure.
How do you do that?
Well, I mean, we have this process where we tell everybody take 10% of your day and devote it to against anything you want to.
Anything you're curious about?
What's that?
Anything you're curious about?
Yeah, and we have hack weeks and that kind of stuff too. But then I think the biggest part is we're not a 5 days a week in the office shop. Never have been, never will be. So people come into the office when they want to, and it seems to work. So that when they come in and we don't have assigned seats, so you can sit next to anybody you want to. So our product people sit next to marketing people, sit next to commercial people, and it's those little interactions that are unscripted that tend to yield like creativity and cool thoughts.
Yes, that goes for traveling too.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Right? I think everyone wants to be more curious, and a lot of people just put these constraints on themselves,
Yeah. Well, look, I think it's being curious takes a little bit of effort, and a lot of people don't want to put the effort. It's so much easier to come home from work or whatever you're doing, plop down on the couch, and then be a passive consumer of what someone else's content, right? Whether that's on a laptop, on TikTok, or on a TV screen, just to be passive consumers versus seeking it out actively, what you want to go do. My advice for just about everybody is put the devices down.
Yeah.
You're missing so much by looking down at a device.
There's a lot of research being done around the correlation between not only devices, so the transition from the flip phone to the smartphone this year, 2012, which signifies a precipitous decline across the board, especially with children.
Yep.
And then there's another line with when broadband was introduced, and I noticed that too. Putting down a device is really great advice. But a lot of people then, I think, want to step out. They want to explore. They want to come up with an idea. They want to go and tell someone about it. But they do need some courage to do that because it's scary.
Yeah.
It is.
It doesn't come naturally for most people.
So what are some ways to become more familiar with that space, that uncomfortable stepping out and going and doing the thing space?
Well, there's lots of forums now where you can actually interact with similarly positioned people who also have new ideas that they want to socialize, and you just get together with those folks. It's easy to find. Thank goodness for the internet. You can actually find this stuff,
Right.
and you can go meet like-minded people who are at a similar stage of development. And it's a friendly audience. I don't know if you've ever tried these stand-up comedy programs.
Have you?
But yeah.
Were you funny?
No, I was not funny. But there's there's no better way of validating.
That was funny.
Yeah, no, there was no better way of validating that I wasn't than getting up on stage and trying to do stand-up.
Right.
And
So uncomfortable.
so uncomfortable. Everything else pales in comparison. After you go through that, it's like, taking a bungee cord off a high bridge. Once you've done that, other stuff doesn't look so hard.
I think for me, that would be dancing.
Dancing, exactly. Well, yeah, dancing. It's funny. I used to do the club scene and all that stuff. You couldn't get me to do that now.
Yeah. For this reason, because it's scary and you should probably step into it to grow to self-development.
I just think a 55-year-old guy at a club is, not the best look for you or for the rest of the crowd.
That's funny.
It's true. It's true.
I want to talk a little bit about Miami.
Sure. Great town.
Where are we in the story of Miami?
Still early days. I mean, if you looked, I've only been here for 9 years, but I remember when there were no buildings in Edgewater. I mean, Miami has a skyline now. It's crazy, and it has traffic. And look, I think the city as it grows is, it's just early innings, because there's so much beauty in Miami, and then you have a favorable government and tax scheme, and then you have this amazing vitality. It's very different from Boston and from New York and Chicago and LA, which is, those are all great cities, and they've lost their mojo, and Miami still has it. I mean, the optimism in this town, it's amazing.
You get that palpable
for sure.
sense.
Oh, look, we're in Miami Beach, right? Which is totally different from Miami, because here we have a lot of tourists, but everyone's happy. You're happy to be here.
Yeah.
And the locals are the happiest of all of them.
Yeah.
And Miami proper on the mainland, where you have the skyscrapers, it's like a clean Manhattan now.
Yeah.
Brickell. Brickell's like a clean Manhattan. It's crazy. Great restaurants, clean streets, hustle and bustle. People don't leave that neighborhood. That's how attractive it is. I personally never go to Brickell.
Right.
I love Miami Beach. That's because I love to surf and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But there are distinct neighborhoods in Miami, and that's really the sign of a city that's coming into its own.
Isn't it interesting when you go to a place that makes you feel really good, how many other great things happen?
For sure.
And vice versa.
Yeah. Positive energy, there's no replicating it. And the same is true of negative energy. When you go to New York now, and I'm there every 2 weeks, what a great city that's lost its way. It's terrible.
Back in the 80s, from the Cornell School of Hotel Management, a study was published called How Destinations Rise and Fall in Popularity. And it was effectively a bell curve and showed how any given destination falls somewhere on this curve. And at the very left-hand side of the curve are these most adventuresome places, the off-the-beaten path places with no English and no tours.
Right.
When people, the adventurers, visit those locations, they eventually come back and tell their slightly less adventuresome friends, you would really like this place. And they work their way all the way up to the top. And back in the 80s, this researcher, Stanley Plog, predicted that Costa Rica would find a sweet spot because of its identity and its positioning, and cautioned that any destination that's not aware of where they fall on the curve will very quickly flow off into what he predicted way ahead before its time, a Cancun.
Or an Acapulco, right?
An Acapulco. Where do you think Miami is in that bell curve?
Ooh, that's a good one. Certainly still in the ascendancy, but the tricky part is, how do you manage the traffic? How do you manage keeping the bay clean? Because the population growth has been so big. It's not a tourism thing anymore. Tourism is still the biggest industry here, but it's fallen by a lot. I think financial services may soon eclipse it. So I think if the government does a really good job with law and order, with infrastructure, with keeping the bay clean, because one of the best things about Miami is swimming.
Yeah.
Right off the shore.
I do it every morning.
That's awesome. It's awesome.
I don't think I could ever move anywhere where I can't do that.
Yeah.
No.
And I think this year, for the first time, we're doing a good job managing spring break crowds too.
Mm-hmm.
So law and order, I mean, it's a simple prescription. You just, like anything else, you need to execute against it.
Right.
And so far, knock on wood or leather chair, it seems to be working.
Speaking of storytelling, have you seen the commercial that they put out?
Yeah. It's not us, it's you.
Yeah.
It's great.
It's a story that
Yeah.
they're telling people that maybe this isn't the right fit for you this year.
Yep.
It's a wonderful branding campaign.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a need for more, better storytelling in destination management organizations and just general travel businesses?
For sure. Look, I think a lot of destinations see ads that work. You know, attractive people, great restaurants, pumping music, hopefully a beach if you've got one. If not, beautiful architecture and beautiful landscaping. But then that's a total mismatch with what actually happens when you visit.
Right.
New Orleans, all right? New Orleans, fabulous city historically. You watch their marketing for the destination. You know, you see happy people, you see the French Quarter, jazz music, lots of smiles. You go there. It's a total mismatch.
Right.
It's like Apple advertising, Walmart shopping experience. You know, total mismatch because that's not what the French Quarter is like anymore.
Right.
In New Orleans like. So I think that's the biggest wrinkle in destination marketing is promising something other than the experience that you're actually going to have.
How much about the bureaucracy of how long it takes to do something on a government level and how fast things are changing now?
Yeah, look,
That was accurate at one point, maybe.
Yeah, look, I grew up in Texas. We used to go to New Orleans to party. You know, it was a fun time.
Right.
You know, now that's a good place to get robbed, unfortunately. So maybe the government can fix that. But I think government's ability to get stuff done is inversely correlated with the size of the government, how many people you put on it, and how complex it is with all the different departments.
Yeah. One of the interesting things I thought about the Miami Beach campaign is a very clear understanding of self.
Yeah.
This is who we are. This is who we are not.
That's right.
And like you said, this maybe we're not for you. And I think that really applies to entrepreneurs and visionaries. It does take a kind of refinement and practice in developing your tastes and your preferences and what you like and what you don't like and what you think is cool and what you think sucks, which is unique to you. It's limited edition.
Right.
The theme of this series of interviews is unlimited because if you really do follow that, the opportunities almost seem endless.
That's right.
Yeah?
That's right.
You can validate?
Yeah, no, I agree. Look, again, going back to the theme of self and situational awareness, ultimately authenticity is what you care about. You know, and once you have that clarity of what you like, it focuses everything you do.
But how do you become more authentic?
You actually stop lying to yourself. Yeah, there's a lot of people who deceive themselves into thinking that something makes them happy, or fulfilled, and actually it doesn't. It makes them unhappy. So, you know, I think you need that, you know, back to your intuition. You need the intuition of knowing what actually fulfills you, and then have the clarity to go chase that, and the sense of purpose to go chase that. You know, I know a lot of friends who are commuting from Connecticut down to the financial services district in New York every day, riding the train for an hour 10 each way. Hate it, and they know they're gonna do it for 20 years. Like I couldn't do that, and I don't think they're being authentic.
So they're not being honest with themselves.
Yeah, that doesn't make them happy, but they do it nonetheless. And you do what makes you happy. You know, you live 3 blocks in this great studio.
Yeah. But this has been a real process for me of figuring out what makes me happy. And that was not an easy thing. That required work, like you said.
Yeah.
And being honest with myself, ultimately, that took practice and intellectual challenging from people. Because otherwise, you just float on by. And it's like, okay, things are okay. Things are not great. Maybe things are a little bit better. But it's not like I am thrilled to walk from my apartment after swimming in the ocean and interview Steve. That makes me so excited.
Yeah.
In a way that I think business deserves. Authenticity is something I'm also very curious about, and I think people need that little nudge. Oftentimes it's a negative event in their life that catalyzes it, or maybe in society.
Yeah, look, it's so easy to get into habits, right? And habit also pertains to how you think, right? So if you're in the same surroundings every day, then you just start to accept it, right? And you don't think outside the box. So sometimes either an unfortunate event happens or a very lucky fortunate event happens,
Mm-hmm.
and that, you know, makes you jump off one set of rails onto another set of rails potentially,
Yeah.
or imagine how your life could be. Usually it's unfortunate versus fortunate because bad luck seems to happen more often than good luck. Good luck you have to work harder for. I've found anyway. But I like to move around a lot. We talked about this earlier, and I've never been more fulfilled as a result.
And I do think the movement is good advice. Like, if you are feeling stuck, if that negative thing does happen that completely rocks your world, which I do believe is happening more and more,
Yeah.
especially as people's long-running businesses. A lot of my clients have been in the business for more than 30 or 40 years. As those foundations get rocked, they are terrified about like this next step. And that's something I think we all happen to share right now, increasingly so.
Sure.
Your colleagues as well? Your friends?
Yeah. Look, I'm 55, so I got friends now who are empty nesters, and their kids go off to college, and they look at their spouse and say, "God, what do we get to talk about now?" Right? So that's a big shakeup. Or they lose their job at this point in time. They have to go compete for a new one. That's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough. But most of them, after a couple of months of being uncomfortable in that situation, figure out a new path and end up in a better place. I mean, I think human nature is we're naturally set up to be happy. Just like kids have a fight with another kid, they're naturally set up to be happy and make friends with that kid 20 minutes later. So I think anytime something unfortunate happens to you, there's always going to be a silver lining, and you're going to end up in a better place. Not always. Some people enter in depression, etc. But most of the time, change is good.
I recently saw a definition of transformation. And the definition was that something old needs to die, which was harsh for me
Yeah.
to hear, but true. Like a butterfly,
Yep.
something old has to die. For me, I've kind of been doing a lot of introspection over the last few years. I've spent the majority of my adult career in hospitality in the lodging and short-term rental industry. And I was kind of getting a little bit bored by it. And I kind of felt like I had explored all of the opportunities. Kind of felt like there was a ceiling, a limit that I kept bumping
Right.
my head up against. And when I took a little bit of space, and when I stepped back, and when I got great input from colleagues, and when I did some soul searching, I went to Israel and I had an incredible trip at this particular moment in my own transformation. One of the wonderful silver linings in hindsight is that I wasn't leaving behind that whole world. It didn't actually die. It's just now part of the new.
Right.
And that was actually kind of comforting.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can always go back to it.
Right.
You can always go back to it. It's like, been there, done that. If I want to go back to that restaurant and eat that one entree, I know where the restaurant is, and I
Right.
know how to order it as long as they don't take it off the menu.
Right.
But I'm going to go try a new one.
Yeah. And I think that's the new kind of growth that I'm trying to get comfortable with. It's not like this or like this. It's like, maybe it's going to be like this.
Yeah.
Maybe it's going to be like this. Individually. For a business, maybe that throws a wrench in things, or is that something you embrace?
So it depends. Like if the business is performing well, most of the time you don't want to fuck with it. Sorry. You
Got
don't wanna-
children listening.
You don't want to mess with it. But at the same time, the environment changes. So you don't want to bet everything on. You don't want to be a one-trick pony, right? So at Kayak, we tried lots of stuff. We even opened up a hotel here in South Beach, which went well for a while, and then it went really badly for a while. We're closing it down. But
And
you
just so
always gotta try
listeners
new
know,
stuff.
this was a new thing in the world of travel.
It was.
Can you just explain it briefly?
Yeah, we just thought the whole hotel experience was a little bit dated and needed some more technology. So we envisioned having, check-in, not at the front desk where you had to wait, but actually while you're in the taxi on the way over there. You could just check in from your phone, and we'll know exactly when you show up. You can use your phone to order stuff, to get into your room, all kinds of cool stuff. And it turns out that technology, the reason hotels are the way they are isn't because no one's thought of this before. It's not a technological issue. It's because humans are habitual and they like the check-in process. It's just, people want a room key, even if it's a little plastic thing, rather than using their cell phone. It takes time to change people's habits.
So that was a big experiment.
It's a big experiment. I mean, we opened 3 hotels, and then we learned, okay, once the technology's out there, people aren't using it. You know, they still want to text the front desk and ask for more pillows, versus just using the Kayak app to do it.
Right. That was a pretty potentially game-changing idea that in the end didn't work for you.
The timing wasn't right, is what I'd say. I think it's still going to go that direction, but it might take another 10 years.
Mm.
You know, it's just like, on our open table business, the idea that people pick up the phone and call restaurants for reservations is just so archaic. It's so much better to use the open table app to do it, right? And then the restaurant knows who you are, knows what you've ordered in the past, knows, how to give you better service. And you can invite your friends and all lots of goodness versus calling the restaurant. But 40% of all restaurant traffic is still walk-in and phone calls.
Mm.
So it takes time.
I just love the experimental nature of we're going to try something that will potentially change everything. And we're going to give it our best try, and we're going to reevaluate a couple years down the line.
Yeah. I mean, it was probably a $15 to $20 million experiment in terms of cash out the door. But you look at companies like Sonder, Selena, others. These were $1 billion experiments, and all that $1 billion is out the door. It's gone. Right. So we tried it. We learned quickly, and then we got out.
And that, in a nutshell, for me, is this iterative process of becoming visionary. Is having an idea that you really believe in, something that you feel, you have clarity, deep down in your heart, this is something that I think is really great. And you VCs, you may poo-poo it, but I am going to keep going, and I'm going to do it, and actually do it. Do a pilot, or do a test, or do 3 hotels, and reevaluate. That, in a nutshell, for me, is vision.
Yeah. Well, the vision was, let's take technology and fix this problem. But you always have to have a plan B, and you always have to be receptive to what the market's telling you. And the market's telling us it's not ready yet.
Right.
It's not ready yet. And the Sonder CEO is a great guy, and also a visionary. He went all in on this plan A, and they're going to go bankrupt.
Yeah.
And he went from having a couple $100 million on paper to unfortunately having nothing.
Right. I think in a way everybody has this in them, the ability to start thinking a little bit more personally, a little bit more originally, outside the box, outside of your job, outside of your existing bubble. And if nothing else, it injects some freaking fun into your life.
Yeah,
right?
For sure. Oh no, it's like learning the hotel business from actual humans working there. I can tell you some great stories. I mean, one of them was we have these little TVs, flat screens on the wall. I think we bought them for $89, right? But if you unplug them from the wall, a message goes to our front desk, and we come up. We send someone to the room. So one morning, notice goes off, TV's off the wall. So we send someone to the front desk, they knock on the door. Door opens. There's a woman putting it into her suitcase. And everything else in the room has also been put in that suitcase. The towels, the pillows, the sheets, everything.
Whole operation.
A whole operation. You're like, oh God, I didn't think of this,
in my online business.
When I did the business plan, I didn't think about theft and fraud. Oh, and the best part was when we charge a credit card.
Of course.
Fraud.
Right.
Fraudulent card. But it's he's like, I'm going to stay in this room for free. I'm going to take everything, including this TV. And get out of here.
Hospitality, it is a people business. You got to be ready for the people.
Unbelievable.
To bring us back to where we started, I asked you to describe what visionary meant to you, and you said that you were not. Curious if in our conversation you've had any adjustments about that definition as it relates to you.
I don't think so. No. I wouldn't put visionary on my resume. I would put a leader, but I wouldn't put a visionary. Because I have an appreciation for the importance of luck, and I just got lucky. I got lucky to have supportive teammates, very supportive investors, and then the timing was perfect. And that's luck. Yeah, I put myself in a position where I could maximize the chances of getting lucky, but it's luck.
I hope you enjoyed that interview as much as I did. One of my absolute favorite points that have really stuck with me from this interview is how Steve firmly believes, still, despite having failed and lost a whole bunch of money, that the hotel model, this integration of online travel agency and accommodations that they tried out in Miami Beach, he still firmly believes that is the future. Now, that might be stubborn thinking to some people, but to me, it's very reassuring from a creative perspective. If you really, truly believe something, it almost doesn't matter the short-term outcome, because you know deep down in your body that that is the future. And I think that's an incredibly powerful place to do business from. It's certainly something I'd like to get better at myself. I mentioned that this episode was brought to you by OwnerRez, and I wanted to share an interesting parallel that I experienced. It was when Paul Waldschmidt, who's the co-founder and CEO of the company, shared with the rest of his team at their company retreat in the Dominican Republic how at this very pivotal moment in the early days, his wife, Katie, came in when Paul was about to pull the plug on the whole operation, and she said, "No, this is something that you believe in. This is something that will work, and I'm here to support you in that." And Paul broke down in front of his team, sharing that story with Katie sitting just a couple rows away. And it gave me goosebumps then, and it gives me goosebumps now recounting it, simply because vision and hope are such powerful elements of a relationship. If someone really believes in you and your idea, that's almost unstoppable. So again, if you'd like to do a demo with OwnerRez, that's a pretty damn good endorsement. Just let them know that you heard it on the podcast. The code VRMB30 will get you 30% off for your first 3 months. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to receive our newsletter, head over to vrmb.com. You can also join our private community, where over 1,000 vacation rental operators are actively and creatively collaborating on a daily basis. That's vrmb.com. You can also send me an email, Matt with 2 T's, at vrmb.com. Just make it creative.